there is no one size fits all that's going to encapsulate or fit our particular mold of, what we should be learning. What is up, homies? Let's talk about learning for the sake of testing, learning for the sake of passing a test. This is might be a little bit of a sensitive topic, I don't know. But I've had some experiences recently where it made me think about it. I mean, I think I've spoken about it a bit on this channel, but it's this idea that in Chinese they say 应试教育. It's like learning for the sake of taking exams. And it's quite common here in Asia, at least in Taiwan, and I've spoken to some people in mainland China too, and they say the same thing. A lot of times my language exchanges are looking to learn English, and they're mainly learning it because they need to take an exam like MBA or the TOEFL exam, or I don't know, there's a bunch, but I had a language exchange recently who told me that she was going to take her test in a couple of months, and she had to learn like 1,000 words in like a couple months, in 3 months. And I was like, what? And she was doing a prep class, and we were going through some of her vocab, and we were going through it one by one. And I would maybe say, list out one of the vocab, and she had to tell me the definition. And then at that point I was like, hey, maybe we can do some example sentences. And she was like, no, there's no time for that. I have too many words. I don't have time to make an example sentence for each one. I'm like, okay. She's like, I just need to memorize these words just so that when I see it on the test, I know what it means. I can remember what it means. And I was having some conversations with some friends the other day, and they were talking about in the buxi bans here, like basically the cram schools here. They basically, like most of the parents here, they just send their students to these cram schools, and then they have to learn English, and they all know it's basically to learn the language so that they can get better test scores. So they're basically at these cram schools, they're not really teaching you how to speak the language or how to use it practically. It's mainly essentially for how to beat the exams, how to beat the tests, how to get better test scores, how to best, see a question on a test and how to best answer it. And it's just, yeah, I guess if that's your goal, I mean, they all know it and they all accept it. They all know that, this is not going to make me great at speaking, but they're still willing to do it because that's just how the system is. They want to improve their test scores. And it just makes me wonder, it's like, why? I mean, like, what's the point? I guess this gets into the role of education in itself and standardization and the role of standardized tests. I guess when you have so many students and you have to compare all these students, standardized tests serve that role, because essentially that's what they do. It's a tool for comparing, for allowing us to compare different students, different people. You can argue with that. It's not the best tool. It's not an optimal tool, but it is a tool. And so I can understand that if you're in the system, if you're learning for school or for testing, like you have to get good marks, or you want to get good marks, then yeah, sure, this is a great way to prep yourself to beat the exams. But then if you don't need to take the test, then I have to wonder, like, why are you doing this? Like, for example, the HSK exam, it's a common exam that a lot of language Chinese learners will take or think about taking. And I've always asked myself, what's the role of this test for me, someone who doesn't need to take it? What's the role for me? Because really it's a standardized test. It serves the purpose of making comparisons or setting maybe a benchmark. However accurate that benchmark is, but it sets a benchmark and it serves as a tool for comparison. And when I ask myself, what's the purpose of it? Why I need to do it? Oftentimes I can't find a good reason for me to take the exam, unless maybe like if I'm looking for a job and they require it, then maybe I'll take it. But other than that, I don't think there's a great role for me to take the exam. I can understand where it might be helpful to use it as a guideline, like a benchmark to, guide your learning. You can sort of look at the vocabulary list and see, how well you're doing, or to maybe guide your learning and try to use those vocabs, try to use the vocab, or maybe to roughly assess your level, or but I mean, I think it's important to not get too wrapped up into thinking that having great test scores, doing well on the HSK exam is going to directly translate into speaking well. I think there's so many great examples of this. Like if you search on Reddit, so many people talk about how people who pass HSK 6 are not necessarily it's not necessarily gonna translate into being able to communicate in real world, because it's so different. A lot of times what you learn in textbooks through these standardized tests, through these prep schools, or prep courses, it's very sterile. It's a way of speaking or a way of communicating that is catered to these tests. And so if you think about each one of us is a unique individual with unique personalities and interests, there is no one size fits all that's going to encapsulate or fit our particular mold of what we should be learning. And so really, it's a tool for comparison, but really the best learning style is really the one that you create for yourself, the one that you discover. And so for me, maybe there's a role, especially in the beginning, if you're just looking for the most common words that you probably should know. But as you get more and more advanced into intermediate level, I really see less of a role for these standardized tests like the HSK, unless you really have to take it. Once you get into the stage where you're able to start challenging yourself with native material, start listening to podcasts, then really, I don't know, the role for these standardized tests, like the learning from textbooks, become less and less important to me, become less and less appealing, because it's just not motivating when I can choose between learning from a textbook and learning from videos of native speaking or listening to a native podcast. Like every day I'm going to pick the native material just because it's more appealing, it's more interesting. They're talking about interesting topics, real topics, things that people are going through. Whatever you're interested in, you're gonna be able to find a topic about it. And I think that this stage, this boundary where you can start challenging yourself with native material is much sooner than most people think. Like that threshold is much lower than people think. I started listening to native material very quickly, and a lot of it was because I didn't understand a lot of it when I first listened to it. But I think a lot of people might be put off by that because they think that they need to understand a certain amount. Like there's this idea of comprehensible input, and I think, comprehensible input is important. I think a good amount of your studying and your input should be comprehensible, but I think there's a huge role for incomprehensible input. I don't know, there's not really a term for it, but I love incomprehensible input because it pushes me, especially if it's something that you're interested in. If you're listening to a podcast and you just, especially if like at first for me, it was just, I love the sounds of the language and I just wanted to hear more of it. And so I would just listen to a podcast every day, just put it on. And it started with the radio. I would just put on the radio every day, or the TV or the news. I would just listen to the sounds, and slowly I would pick up more words as I was learning through other means, like through comprehensible input, learning vocabulary. The incomprehensible input was becoming more and more comprehensible. And so, yeah, just a ramble about standardized tests and the role that they play. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys like using standardized tests or the HSK exam when you're learning a language? Does it help you? Does it help give you structure? I think giving you structure is a reasonable reason to use it. I think my main thing is just not having a realistic expectation of what it actually brings. Because there's so much nuance in a language. There's so much rule breaking in native speech. There's so much colloquialism, so much slang, there's so much nuance that I feel that textbooks and these prep classes, they can't teach, that can only be learned on the ground, actually doing it, actually speaking, actually listening, actually being a player, a participant in this game of language learning. I think as you become more active, as you become less of a passive learner in the sense that you're just consuming material that's made specifically for learners, as you become more of an active participant in the realm of native speakers where you're interacting with them, you're consuming native material. I think as you're doing that more, you're going to learn more of how native speakers actually speak and the real practical use of the language, if that's what you're looking for. Anyways, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys next time.